Is this your first podcast?
Yeah.
Really?
What do you mean? I'm not a celebrity.
No, but I mean, there's just like, I think in today's time, like everybody has some kind of form of a podcast, like kind of like a blog. Remember like when blogs first came out?
Yeah.
Everybody had some form, whether they monetized it and they did really good, or they just did it for, like for me, when I started, I was just trying to be something,
Yeah.
you know.
I just, someone like you asked me for a podcast. I'm like, dude, what am I going to say?
I always have the best conversation with you. So if you guys listening, we have Yuriy Manchik on the podcast. He is a photographer, a long friend of Irene and I. In fact, his wife, Julia, which I think she's trying to coordinate her to be on the podcast just with her. They're roommates back in college. But I met Yuriy through a bunch of acquaintances. But you're actually, I don't know, I want to speak to you in third person, but you're interesting because you're the one that kind of planted the seed in the back of my mind to get into YouTube. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, kind of.
Mm-hmm. It was, how long ago was that? It was when
You were in Idaho.
I was in Idaho, my first house.
Yeah.
It was my first house. We're sitting in the backyard. I just got into Instagram, and I remember picking your brain quite a bit on Instagram because as a photographer, and you're well established in Seattle, I remember like talking to you about like how to take pictures. And I thought the whole thing of like, you need the tech, you need the hardware, you need the camera in order to take a good picture. And you're like, dude, you don't need that stuff. Like, and I specifically remember you and I went out for like beers or something like that when you're still living in Queen Anne in Seattle. And you're like, look, I could take a good picture with your phone. And you took my phone and you like, I don't know if you remember this part. Like we were at this like industrial.
That was Smith.
Is that what it was?
Smith in Capitol Hill.
Yeah. And then there was this like live edge slab bar top, and then the light was hitting just right, and you were just like, you played around with my phone, and then you boom captured it, and I was like, you're right, but you're good at it because you know how to look for the opportunities versus somebody who's not good at it. They're not looking for the opportunities. They rely on tech.
Yeah. No, tech is. I think everyone starts out like that. When you're beginning, you get intimidated with, oh, I need the best this. I need to spend $5-10 grand, and I mean, you could if you had the money and you wanted to, but if you have the passion, that's more important. And like, if you have the drive, I think you can take good photos with anything. There's guys that use little cheap 35 millimeter film cameras that have way better photos than guys with $10,000 worth.
How much are those 10 millimeter photo cameras?
You can get them at Goodwill for like $50.
Really?
I mean, film's not cheap. Film's $5, $10 a roll plus developing. But the point is, like, you can get great shots with anything.
Yeah.
I mean, just photography wise, like. Yeah, you just tech. It's like a marketing thing. People push tech. You need the newest lens, newest camera, newest. You don't. Like,
do you think it's forgiving to a beginner person? Do you think if somebody, let's say, says, okay, I'm going to be an influencer, I'm going to be a photographer, not a photographer, because that's, you definitely have to invest in the money in it. But you're like, I'm going to create a spot on the internet. Do you feel like somebody who doesn't know photography needs to get at least a camera that is forgiving enough that it can clean up a lot of stuff? Kind of like you and I were talking about these mics. So we sat down and you're like, what's these mics? And I go, well, this is the Shure SM7Bs. They're very forgiving. You go, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you have to do the least amount of editing on them. Is that the same with cameras?
Well, when it comes to editing, that's another thing. I rather get the shot right in camera and like just get it how I want it. So I have to edit less. Like something like kind of with these mics, like you get a good mic, so you have to edit less.
Correct.
Same thing with, translates to photos. Rather get a good lens. Lens is more important than cameras. Cameras most new cameras are pretty good. Lenses is kind of where you can spend, $100 on the lens or $5,000 on the lens, and it shows. And then you have to edit less.
Now, why does it show? Because I mean, essentially, my small understanding of lenses as when I first started creating videos is, I was working in a very dark lit area. And I remember with the one, you really guided, you gave me a lot of the first fundamentals of like, what can I get away with? Because I was filming an area where it's like, it was a dark garage. There's not a lot of natural lighting. So you're like, okay, you need something with a bigger aperture.
Yeah.
Or technically it's a lower aperture.
Yeah.
Right.
Lower aperture, bigger opening. More light comes
exactly.
in. Yeah.
And that's what my like beginning understanding of it. So like technically what is a good lens? Like,
the more glass, the more expensive. Glass, it's coated with whatever they coat it with. The more glass there is, the more expensive it is. The bigger the opening, lower the aperture number. Like if you just want to look for fun, look at lenses that have a 0.95 aperture.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's,
I heard of 1.2. I think is the lowest I've ever seen.
that's kind of and they make one that's goes. I don't know if it's just Leica. I think Canon makes one too that goes 0.95, and those are, don't quote me, but like 10 or 15 grand, if not
Really?
more. Yeah, and they're like the focus is just, it's really hard to focus on it because it's the lower you go in aperture, you get really good bokeh, but only
What's bokeh for people who don't know what a bokeh is?
just the diffused background, not diffused, but like the blurred out background.
So it's
you
like
get
a
the
portrait
lights.
picture, right? The portrait is like a very focused person, blurred background.
Like in an iPhone, yeah, they got portrait mode. They're just copying like a bokeh or a low aperture shot. So the lower you go, the more blurred out the background will be. Where if you shoot at f8 or something, everything's pretty crisp.
Now, most of the f8s, they're like, those are the lenses that are like really long. So if you're like on a NASCAR, a Formula One racetrack,
those are zoom lenses.
those are just zoom lenses.
Yeah, those are just called not even zoom prime lenses, but very. So the reason it's so big is because it's got a very low aperture, and that just means you got to put a ton of glass in there.
So you'll still give you the same bokeh, but
Yeah,
you'll be able to
exactly.
reach out there.
Yeah, so you could see like, okay,
interesting.
F1 or something. The car is perfectly in focus. Everything else is blurred out. If you shot that with a cheap lens, you wouldn't get, the car wouldn't be as separated from the backdrop. The backdrop would be kind of more or less be all in focus. But if you shoot with those big lenses down at like 2.8, the car is crisp. Everything else is blurred out. Yeah, that's how you get those good shots.
Kyle, does that still apply for video too?
Yeah,
100%. So you can still get the bokeh and all that stuff just for video.
Lower aperture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grab
But
this.
then,
Turn on. What's that?
I think we're on. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, like was mentioned, it's just harder to focus when you're like 2.8, 1.4.
Interesting. Do you feel the same way? Because like you've always said this, like you don't need camera gear. What's your opinion about camera gear, like in terms of lenses,
I mean, it's similar
from the video perspective?
Yeah, it's similar to like photography. Like a nice lens will out trump a nice camera. If you only have the money for one, definitely go for a lens.
Definitely go for a lens.
Because I mean, when I was starting off, I just had cheap gear, and with like cheap lenses, you're not gonna get like a sharp image. Nothing's really gonna look in focus. I mean, depending on the lens, you can find good ones, but
Yeah, my first camera, when I bought like a first YouTube camera, I was under a contract with Home Depot, and I was in their influencer like tool review program, and they just signed me to create my first like blog post, and they're like, you know, what would you like to do to be featured? And they gave me the amount of money that I shouldn't have had to be paid for when I was such a small influencer. Like I think I was presenting myself higher than I was. And I remember borrowing my friend's little Nikon, whatever their entry level thing that looks like that right there, like the little it's called the Rebel. Nikon is a Canon Rebel. It was a Canon Rebel. It was a Canon Rebel with a stock lens, nothing new to it. I think stock lenses are like 4.5 aperture, maybe even higher. And I went to my garage and I was taking step-by-step pictures trying to write this blog post. And I did not know how to adjust anything on this camera, but the only thing I was thinking about was like, this is going to make it look good. And I looked back on that blog post till this day. And it's the most cringiest pictures with what was better than my iPhone. But looking back at it now, I was like, I'd probably could have done a little bit better. I mean, I was basically using a tool that I wasn't trained to use. And that was my biggest like frustration with this whole thing, where it's one thing if you go, okay, here's a camera, let me teach you how to take like a proper setting, versus going, here's an iPhone, look for opportunities of good pictures. And I feel like you've always kind of done that. You've always, and your wife, Julia, she worked for Moment lenses, and that was an adapter for the iPhone that kind of cultivated people to be, okay, here's an enhancement attachment to your phone that now you can kind of put on this hat of a photographer and go look for these opportunities. Do you feel like people just need to do that more often? Or
Yeah. I mean, Moment lenses were cool because they had a macro adapter, a wide angle, and a portrait. So it was nice. You could get, you know, you just had more flexibility. This was before iPhone had the 3 lenses. This was back when, you know, iPhone had 1 lens, and now you can add attachments and just go out and do more with it. And I think I really like street photography. Some of the photographers I really like, I think, are people just go out and find stuff. Those are the most interesting photos. Like photos of amazing nature or a cool car. It's like, oh, okay, cool. But kind of scroll past it. But photos of like people just doing their own thing, or a city, or like things that you wouldn't normally see that someone took the time to like, hey, I'm going to go walk around the city and see what I can find. Those are cool photos.
So what makes okay, and that's I'm glad you mentioned that. What is that rubric for a cool photo of people just doing the thing? Because Kyle does the same thing with me. We have never reshot a scene where he's like, okay, hey, just walk with this wood here, like a director would do.
Yeah.
And I remember he's saying, he's like, no, I'd rather it be natural.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I get that. I get that.
Even for shooting weddings, they're like, it's your wedding. Do your thing. Don't try to act. When you act, your body, you might feel like you're normal, but your body senses like, hey, I even here, I feel like I'm kind of tense. I'm like, just, okay, chill out. We're just chatting. Yeah. Like same thing with photos. Like, hey, just do your thing. Like forget about the camera. And those photos are good. Or like the best photos of people, like for street photography, is when you catch them doing their own thing. I'm just thinking of our travel photos. Okay, Morocco. Some of my favorite photos, because we had a little point and shoot right here. You know, people don't want a camera in their face, so we would just kind of keep it.
You do like a body cam kind of.
Well, no, just a little point and shoot without a big lens, but we kept it around on a neck strap, and you just kind of walk around and snap.
No, that's what I mean. You took a picture from your chest
exactly.
cam, like a body cam
You just
style.
put one hand. People don't even know. It's quiet. It's mirrorless, and those are some of my favorite photos because it's people just doing their own thing. They're not aware of the camera. Whereas as soon as you're like, hey, can I take a photo? Then they kind of, oh, let me grab a fruit. Like, oh, hey, look, I got a fruit, or I mean, and those photos aren't bad either, but it doesn't make you. The natural ones are cool.
What do you think makes a picture so good or appealing when people are just doing their thing as opposed to posing? I get the whole posing; it's artificial. You're doing something you're not used to. But like, let's say you see a guy with textured, wrinkly face, and he's eating an apple, but you shot it in this black and white and whatever. What makes pictures in the wild like that so attractive?
That moment, like. Because that's not posed. There's just a guy. I think a lot of times looking at his eyes or his expression, he was just doing his own thing, thinking about whatever he was thinking. He wasn't aware of a camera, and that moment just brings you back. Like when you travel, you would have walked by and seen that, and it would just kind of register in your mind, like, oh, that's cool. He's an interesting looking guy. But now that you see it, someone took a photo of it and it froze that moment. That makes you stop. Like, oh, like I wonder what he's thinking. I wonder what he's. Yeah, it just makes you stop and think a little bit more about the photo. Versus a nice photo of just scenery, there's nothing really to think about. Like I'm just thinking of Instagram. You're just like, yeah, okay, cool. Another waterfall, another mountain, add a person to that photo or an animal or something. That makes you kind of like, oh, something more to it.
Why do you think that we stop and look at a picture that you captured of somebody in the wild doing the thing versus walking by that person doing the wild? Why don't we stop? And the same way we would sit down and appreciate a waterfall, like on this bench, and we just watch it for a minute, or a sunset. Why do you think we don't do the same when, like, almost like an intentional version of an artistic way of like people watching?
Yeah, I mean, people love to people watch. I think like the whole like, oh, you go to Paris and you sit in a cafe and you people watch is awesome. But we don't stop and watch a man eat an apple because he's going to get awkward and he's going to stop doing what he's. And I mean, he'll stop. He'll stop doing what he's doing. He's like, oh, there's someone watching me. I'm not going to eat my apple, or I'm going to change the way I'm doing it because now people are watching me. Versus if you had just capture that without him knowing, that's why I think people like it because like, hey, this photo was captured without him. It's natural and it's a moment that's rare. It's a moment that wasn't posed. It's just in it, someone in his element doing their own thing, and yeah, that.
Have you ever thought about more of like a deeper meaning behind like when you capture a picture? I don't know if I'm just getting a little too like weird about it, but I have these moments, and you're a dad as well of 3 kids now, and we have this little Aura electric, one of those digital frames, and then we just upload it through our app. And all the pictures that I specifically select for it are always obviously pictures of the kids and the family when we're doing stuff. And whenever you walk by, get a cup of coffee, you see like the stuff like a photo album, but that's like almost like forced on you. And the way my brain registers is like, these are memories that I'm jumping back into. These are captured moments that are almost like frozen in time, like, the same way they explain NFTs. This is a part of either history or a cultural event that somebody created, not only a digital form, but almost like encapsulated that you now have ownership of. And that's why the way I look at those pictures in this digital Aura frame. Do you have any kind of like of that like frou-frou, like spiritual like feeling of like this is a memory of a person doing a thing? This is a moment caught in time that could almost be its own and like has more value than you think you would.
I mean, I think most photos, there's a lot of times Julia will mention like, hey, remember this moment 5 years ago or something. And the only way I'll remember it is there's a photo. It's crazy. Like photos will trigger something in your brain. That's like, oh, if there wasn't a photo, you wouldn't remember this moment. But the fact either, I don't know if it's because maybe I took the photo or if it's maybe Julia took it and I've seen it a few times and it just sticks in your head. Lots of times that's happening. I'm like, that's a big thing for like, okay, I should be taking way more photos of my kids because if it's like that, I want to be able to remember a lot of things. I'm just like, we just had a birthday party for our youngest. It's just too busy, too much stuff going on. I didn't even pick up a camera. It's just got to get this, do this, say hi to everyone. I'm trying to think back to the party. The moments that I remember are the ones that I've seen photos of. That Julie took photos and I've seen it. It was like, hey, when he was eating his cake, I know there's like 5 photos. And that's what like registers in my head is like the photo. So it's almost, the photos help you remember things in my mind.
They say that I don't know what book was that reading recently, but they were talking about how all in all people always feel that nobody has enough time. Everybody like would agree that there's not enough daylight and there's not enough time to, and the summer flew by too quick and the winter went by too quick and all of a sudden kids are back in school but the way to counter that, what they're suggesting is you live in the moment. You don't allow yourself to start wondering about, okay, well, next month we have to plan the trip to Arizona because we were committed to that. Like what they're saying is, and I've tried this actually very mildly this last couple of trips that we've taken, and we were on this lake, we were in McCall with the family, and I would just sit there and I'd be like, okay, don't think about what you have going on for work tomorrow or the next day. Just try to be present in the moment and like suck in the air that's here. Like take these mental images of your kids, say yes to them. And I wonder if photos are just an easy way of capturing it for us to like look back on. And I think unfortunately it always brings us to regret because every time you look at any photos, you never go like, oh yeah, I was fully present, I was fully aware, and then I also now got a picture. I think most of the time we go, I was not fully present, I was not fully aware. Like you were saying, your kid's birthday, it was busy, it was chaotic. Fortunately, there's a picture for you to like do a little time traveling to.
Yeah.
But so there is this always like, I didn't do enough, I wasn't present enough in that moment. I have to rely on this image to be.
No, I mean, it's true. Like, I mean, there's lots of times when, I mean, it's not a party setting, it's just an everyday setting where you don't take any photos. You're like, oh, it's just a random everyday, why would I take a photo? It's just, but sometimes I force myself like, hey, just grab a camera, whatever. They're playing, just take a random photo of them playing. And I really like those photos because it reminds you of like, hey, not every day was a party or a hike or this, or we went biking. Some days where we were just hanging out at home doing Legos, and those photos kind of like, oh yeah, we did spend time playing at home. It just brings back another memory that like, hey, we did have some good times.
Is it because we convince ourselves that we didn't do enough?
I think so. Because you're like, oh, we just spent the last 2 days at home doing nothing.
We did nothing this last summer, and you go, no, but let's look at the images.
And that helps. Like, oh, we did it. Yeah. So it's kind of.
What was your background before you decided to start your own photography business? I actually don't know this part of the story.
I was going to college for nursing.
Nursing.
Yeah.
I was actually going for nursing as well. How far did you get in? Because I couldn't get in the program.
I got my AA. I did CNA.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did the CNA, and I'm like, dude, I can't do this. Like,
Yeah,
what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I knew that all along. It was just like, oh, it's safe and it pays well, and I'll just start studying this. And and I think the hardest classes were the first ones, like biology and chemistry,
anatomy and physiology.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't get this. So that was just kind of went through the motions, got my AA, and at the same time I got a job where I had a lot of free time to work on, getting my photography up. And
so what made you go? Because I mean, so clearly you go, I don't like this. So what made you go photography? Did you always have an artistic bone?
Yeah, I was pretty artistic, and I like gear. I like, and I just bought at the time Nikon D70. So this was probably 2004, 2005.
So you're really showing an interest in photography.
Yeah, and it was more like I don't know what the right word is, like financial. I just paid like $1,000 for a camera. I'm like, hey, how can I make my money back? That's a lot of money at the time for me. I was 19. And I was like, hey, I'll try shooting some gigs, some weddings or portraits, something to make my money back. And then we'll see how that goes. And
so right at the gates, you felt confident enough that you can do like gigs.
Yeah. So
really?
I went on Craigslist. I was like, hey, I'm starting with photography. Here's my portfolio of cars and flowers and mountains, like just random stuff. If you want me to do your wedding, $200. And there's people who are like, hey, you know what? We'll take a risk.
It's $200.
Yeah. He has an SLR. He has a decent camera. So,
Yeah.
they liked it. And well, it was one wedding. The other one was like a renewal. So it wasn't a real wedding. But it was enough that I was like, okay, this is fun. I like it. And the 3 clients I had through Craigslist are happy. So let's work on a website. Let's get this going. My Diamond Photography.
That was the name of it, Diamond Photography. You know what's funny? I actually remember you're Ukrainian, I'm Russian, and for anybody who doesn't know, typically in specifically large metropolitan areas, a lot of the Slavic people kind of know of people, but they might not know them personally, right? They're and through like passing. And I remember I knew of you. Especially through our friends, some of our mutual friends. And I actually, like when I close my eyes, I can actually remember sitting back, however how old I was, on my computer at least 20 years ago. And I remember your Facebook, or maybe it was even on MySpace back then, but maybe I think to be on the safe side, it was Facebook. And I think it was your business launching photo, and it was you in a fedora and like in a white, like short sleeve button up shirt on a beach, and it was a black and white image. I think that might have been your profile picture.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
I remember.
Was I holding a camera?
I think you were holding the camera,
okay.
but maybe it was your website. I think I clicked on your website, and that was like the big banner on the very top, you know, and it's black and white, and it says like Yuriy Manchik, or no, it just said Manchik Photography. That's what it was. It wasn't. It didn't say.
So
Diamond.
this was after.
This was after that.
I mean, Diamond was only around for like a year or two. I was like, okay, this is ghetto. My business card was a huge diamond. I was like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense. Weddings and engagement rings and diamonds. And, And then just like, oh, what? After like a year, I'm like, okay, time to change this up. Well, also, again, that was without me not knowing anything. Then I started getting into forums and groups and talking to other photographers and seeing what's out there, how people do things. And you're like, oh, okay. So there's one guy, Mike Cologne. I think that's how you say his last name, in Southern California. He was like, in my eyes, the Michael Jordan of wedding photographers. And his logo was his signature.
He was very established.
Yeah, he was good. This guy at the time was charging $20,000 a wedding, which was nowadays I feel like it's not that big of a deal. By that time, we were like, dude, that's crazy. People are paying you $20,000. And he was just like a cool guy. And so I looked up to him. I was like, okay, his website or his logo is a signature. I'm copying that.
That's nice. I'm always curious about artists like this, because in YouTube, when I got into it, I mimicked and replicated the people who I looked up to. So I always said Casey Neistat, Peter McKinnon, all these other guys. And so in my earlier stages, I would, whether if Casey was doing quick edits, if he's doing time-lapse photography, video clips of like cars passing in the downtown area or the sunrise, sunset, drone footage, I would do that. And people like pick up on and be like, no, dude, that's not you. Like you're copying, you're a wannabe. Did you feel that in the photography space? And if you did, were you inspired by certain people to kind of push like your skill set further?
I think there's only so much you can do with wedding photography. You can't. Everyone copies everyone. There's very few that are kind of do their own thing, in my opinion. I'm trying to think of some of the bigger ones, and I think let's just say there's 10 big ones, and everyone just kind of copies it, kind of adds their own spin to it. A really good one from our area, from Tacoma, Sean Flanagan. I think he kind of did his own thing, but then everyone started copying him.
What's his thing?
He just had his own style, his own editing, and just kind of at first you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like this, and then it grows, and you're like, dude, like actually, yeah. And I think
how would you describe it? I'm curious if it's something different, because usually it's warm and
his is not warm, not very like pastel color, not filmy. Filmy in a sense that it was more like grungy almost.
Oh, okay.
Very film look.
Moody, like is that an appropriate?
Nah, I don't know. I wouldn't describe it as moody.
No.
That's just his editing, and his shots were also very. He shot very wide, which for weddings you're always like, why are you shooting so wide? That's more a photojournalistic thing, but he made it work. It's just kind of his own thing. Like, and a lot of people would be like, oh, hey, that looks like Sean's style, or I think a lot of people started copying that, and I almost feel like he started like the Pacific Northwest style, where it's we started doing like film looks for digital, adding more grain, making the whites more, I don't even know, more not white. I don't know how you making the whites more gray. Like,
okay.
Just like a film look. And because then we'd go to conferences in California and stuff, people would be like, oh yeah, like the Pacific Northwest style, It's kind of the
So why wouldn't those guys, if they're trying to almost like backtrack to create more of like a distress feeling to this, why not just shoot from film and have that natural like part captured?
yeah. I mean, film's more expensive. It's harder. You're taking 24, 36 shots. You don't know what you got.
Oh,
You got to wait. You got to pay for all that. Whereas digital, you know, you see what you got right away. You shoot way more. It's easier, and then you just add that. So
interesting.
it just makes it way easier. It's cheaper. Yeah, it's just a lot easier.
Okay, so you were a beginner photographer. You got into, you knew how to adjust your camera settings, but at this time maybe you didn't have your own style. You just knew how to take a picture. What was the big jump off point that you went, okay, this is going from me knowing how to run a camera to me having my own kind of like style? Where did that connection happen?
I don't think there's like one moment where it happened. It just slowly kind of I look at a lot of other photographers and start shooting, and kind of it kind of grew out on its own. I would look at my photos, be like, oh, you know, I shot that. Or it's more you shoot throughout the day, and then you go back and look through all your 4,000 images.
That's a lot of images to look through.
Yeah. I mean, it's an 8-10 hour day, sometimes 12 hours. So, and you shoot a lot. Just there's event photography. There's stuff going on. Whereas, you know, you're doing a commercial shoot. It's like, hey, we've got 5 products to shoot. We'll shoot it from 5 different angles. That's 25 shots, 50 shots. You know, maybe 100 if you want to do different lighting. Wedding, there's stuff going on nonstop. There's 200 guests. You want to take photos of, especially if you want candid photos. You want people. Hey, someone saying toast. You want to get reactions. There's 100 photos of reactions, and pick out 10, 15 that are good.
They have like an emotion behind them?
Yeah. So it's like real raw emotion. You know, you'll shoot 100 because you're not going to capture. By the time you might turn around, they stop laughing, or someone else put their wine glass up and block their face. So you shoot a lot. But then as you culling is like when you go through the photos, I think that your style comes out a bit too, because you decide which ones to choose, which ones not to keep. And yeah, like some of the ones I might keep, you might go through and be like, why'd you keep that one? I'd rather keep it. Yeah, that's where a lot of styles come out of the 4,000. Let's say you and I went through a wedding. I shot 4,000 images each. Let's say you picked your favorite 100, I picked my favorite 100. I don't think they'd match up. I think only 3 or 4 or 5 might match up.
So it almost seems like what you did almost evolved to its own thing. Is that why? Is that fair to say? Like you took 4,000 pictures, and the pictures that you chose versus the pictures that I would have chosen was just like your body's natural way or your mind's natural way of like evolving or creating a style that you were drawn to.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yep. Yeah. And like I focus more on the photo. Then the editing, I try to always do as little as possible. Editing. Really? I'm like, I want to get a good photo. I don't want to spend hours on a computer editing. I just want to throw a quick filter on it, make it pop a little bit. And just talking to a lot of beginner photographers, everyone spends way too much focus on editing. It's not about the editing. It's you're a photographer. If you want to be a photographer, take good photos. The editing should be like a last little bump up the photo.
So the editing, are you just putting one of those LUTs over it, or color? No, LUTs is for video, Kyle, right?
Yeah.
What's photos? What do you guys call them for photo?
Presets.
Like
Lightroom
presets.
Yeah.
So you're just putting
I threw
like a 10% opacity, or how far are you going with this?
Through the years, I just kind of make my own.
You've created your
just
own.
kind of created I usually take my blacks down, bump up the contrast, a little bit of saturation.
Whoa, blacks down. Why? I thought you usually want to have more of like the blacks to be like nice and firm and vibrant. And
I don't. I want them more faded.
Faded.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
more,
Interesting.
add some grain, convert some to black and whites.
Video and photo is interesting because Kyle and I were just talking the other day about, some of the color corrections we want to do. And it's funny when you're watching, let's say, just for an example, a YouTube video, the videos that I find very captivating, and I think the majority of the people do, because there've been studies done on this, is the stuff like a thumbnail, something that's contrasted, vibrant, lots of colors. Kyle made a great point about like when you walk through a Costco and you see a TV that's being for sale, there's a lot of like the cheetahs are very yellow and black, and the Amazon is very rich in color. So that's very like satisfying to the eye. And so when it comes to watching video, you want that pop. But it seems like with photo, you almost want to allow for, and paintings, you want to almost like create room for like a discovery of your brain wandering.
I mean, no, that's just one style. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I still think the majority of people would prefer a vibrant photo. Like,
Really?
I feel like that's Sony's whole thing. It's like, hey, look at every photo Sony, like, it's like, hey, you give vibrant colors and yeah, like the whole HDR thing. People jumped on the train. HDR was amazing, and that never. I was like,
High dynamic range. So they do
Yeah.
what? They do low, medium, and high
It just looks
exposure.
Those photos never. I didn't like.
It's
just,
essentially like real estate photography, right? Where
Yeah,
they like
yep,
underexpose it,
yep.
overexpose it, and find a middle.
yeah. So if you're shooting a photo from the inside, you could see outside what's outside too.
Outside,
So
right?
you're exposing for the inside and what's outside the window in the middle. Combine them all, and you've got high dynamic range. You can see everything. It's not natural. Like for some photos it works. Some photos it's too much. I mean, it's a style. Some people love it. Some don't. Like even for video, I'm like Wes Anderson movies. I don't think his are vibrant. He kind of mutes them down. Makes
What
them
are
look,
Wes Anderson movies?
Budapest Hotel.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
What's the other?
By the way, I was in Budapest when they were filming that.
What?
Yeah. Remember when I did my 5 weeks of traveling?
Yeah.
My last place was stopping by at Budapest,
Uh-huh.
and I was couch surfing over there when you're staying with whoever.
Yeah.
And that's the place I lost my wallet. We decided to find, me and my buddy that were traveling, we decided to find a hot spring. We found a natural hot spring that was there. And they make them these like Greek places, like pillars and like these cool like buildings. We found one. We hiked to it because we didn't, through the city. And then once we get there, there was like 20 RVs and trailers that said Hollywood Video, and they were shooting Budapest at that time. Hotel
awesome.
Budapest at that time.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Yeah. Dang. Should try to meet. Yeah. He's got Owen Wilson is in all his movies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's again different style. There's a few movies that just kind of have it just sets the setting. Like, okay, if you mute the colors, make it more, I don't know, it just has a warmer feel. It gives the film a different feel. I think same thing for photos. The photo comes off a little different.
Interesting. Do you feel like you're wanting to constantly do you feel like you want to evolve in your like as an artist? Do you want to like evolve from this style to the next style, or do you feel like you just want to continue to do what you're doing but it's at a different scale? By the way, do you revert to yourself? I mean, not to be pretentious, but like, do you consider yourself to be an artist? Because I've never spoken to an artist.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
not really.
No.
It just seems weird to say I'm an artist. Like,
But there's an expression, right?
and well, yeah, and the people that do say, I mean, maybe for wedding photography, because I'm like, I'm here to capture your wedding. You designed everything. You got the dress. You picked the flowers. You did everything. I'm just here to capture it. There's the only artistic part I really do is kind of where I put you and kind of get where the lighting. Which I mean, yeah, I guess it's a little artsy, but when I think of artist, I think someone that takes something blank and creates something from. I mean, like you're an artist. You just made. Yeah. If I came in. Or for like a commercial shoot, like you gave me your product and you gave me the free reign to design everything, make what I want, make a masterpiece, marketing thing out of it. Like, okay, that takes more, artistic talent to do versus like, hey, our wedding day is done. Can you just come and capture it?
How often are you getting photos that are not in focus? Like blurred out?
Well, I just started shooting with a new camera and it's,
is that the new one that you showed me? It looks vintage, but it's really a new one.
The Leica M10. So it's rangefinder. So the image, when you look through it, there's a little box in the middle, and you got to combine the two images. So if I'm taking a photo of you, there's two of you, and I got to focus it till
you were showing me that thing, and it felt like the most counterintuitive thing I've ever held. Like you were like these two. Like opaque, under illuminated images. It looked like a doctor's exam. You know, they say like, tell me when what are they? Because it's used the same image. It's the hot air balloon. Tell me when the two hot air balloons cross. And you're like, that was the weird. Have you ever seen that, Cal, before? The Leica's focusing?
No, I haven't.
No, it's literally like,
I know what camera you're talking about.
Yeah, here's a screen. Here's like you're taking a picture of Yuri. Here's Yuri, and then here's another exposed like opaque image of Yuri, and you're supposed to scroll it like to zoom it, and somehow the images like line up, and that's like focused. And that's your peaking.
The craziest thing is it's only that little box. It's not like the whole viewfinder. Everything you see through it, like when you're focusing on an SLR, the whole image is blurry. If you're manually focusing it, and then you twist it till it's sharp and take a shot. This is like this little. So you're always having to recompose. Like, yeah, it takes some. So I've been shooting the kids a lot with it. Like we'll go out, take photos, and just to practice. Kind of kids move around fast. just kind of run after them, get shots, but it's fun. It's like you're learning a new skill.
It's like driving a manual car.
Yeah, you're like relearning. I'm like, hey, this is I was kind of burnt out of photography, but now this is fun. Like I'm trying to relearn, trying to get a good shot, and then when you get a good shot, you're more proud of it. You're like, oh, cool, I got this. Had to chase the kids, and just the right moment, it's in focus, and I also think so. Yeah, so to answer your question, way more out of focus shots, but it's more of my kids and stuff, so I don't care.
You're not taking it to work.
The goal is to shoot with it.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. So why would you take it to work if it's such a? What would you get from an image taken on that, like a M10, right, versus taking a picture on your Canon DSLR?
Just different look. Leica has
a different look.
Leica has a little bit different look. It's more for me. I would enjoy shooting it more. I think I would. Yeah, I would enjoy it. It's harder, but I would enjoy it more. I'd be more proud of the shots I got. Like
interesting. I think you and I were very similar in the sense because based off of our years of friendship and communicating about stuff, I think explaining this makes more sense like driving a manual car. Like you have a vintage 2002 style BMW, which has, it's a manual. The pedals go into the ground versus going into the thing. You have vintage motorcycles. I think you want to be hands-on versus just like pressing a button. I think you want to be part of this user experience.
No, for sure. I mean, with an SLR, it almost makes it too easy. You just point, click, 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 boom. You just got 10 shots in 2 seconds. And you're kind of like, well, anybody can do that. It just doesn't make it as, versus when you use a Leica, you have to focus and you get a great shot and you're like, okay, that was a hard shot to get. I got it. You feel better about it.
You earned it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think, SLRs are still better for work. The transition will be slow just because I wouldn't want to miss stuff. With an SLR, I'm more confident. Like, hey, I'm not going to miss that shot, that kiss, or that moment. Or with the at this moment right now, I'm like, okay, I'm not 100% confident I'm going to get that shot in focus.
Do you know those Instagram accounts that you'll scroll through? Well, they'll give you these like quick 30-second camera hacks. Well, they'll take a camera. Peter McKinnon actually, I think that's how he got the very beginning stages of virality. Is he did like 10 camera hacks in 10 seconds, and he put a rubber band around the lens. If he would put his belt around the thing and swing it. I was watching this other one. It's not Peter McKinnon's, but somebody else. This girl takes this camera and scratches the lens up and then takes a picture behind something. And it looked like somebody was sticking the camera through like bushes and stuff like that. And it created this distress. So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me if you were to take a picture that's like crisp and perfectly lit and all that stuff, it draws far less emotion than if you were to have some kind of thing in the way or some kind of color correction. Like that's drawing emotion versus something that's just like the way you saw it, the way you caught it.
I think we see so many crisp, perfect photos that it's, especially with Instagram, it doesn't make you stop. When you're scrolling, there's so many great photos that it's just like, yeah, great. And then when there's something a little weird like that, you're like, oh, hold on, how'd they do that? Or why'd they do that? Or what's going on here? And like for wedding photography, like shooting into the sun to get flare, like that's not, any photographer from 20, 30 years ago would be like, dude, why are you doing that? That's bad. That's a bad shot. But it was cool. We were all doing it because you get some flare coming in and you're like, this is awesome. It gives it some more. It's not just a perfectly lit photo. Now you've got flare doing weird stuff and you can see the couple kind of in lit. Yeah. It's just something extra that makes you stop and wonder how they got that shot or why did they do the shot like that.
Interesting. But, yeah, no, it's amazing what some of that stuff would do. But then on the other side of things, if you are a content creator, you want to appeal to catch somebody's attention. You almost want to grab somebody's attention. Now, you were talking about you would scroll through a lot of these crisp images and then, whoa, this one's weird or a little different. What's going on here? But then from so there's a lot of YouTubers like Preston Styles. My kids love Preston Styles. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's just like, he acts like he's like a 15-year-old kid, but really he's like somebody in his 20s. And they do all these Minecraft videos and all these challenges. Millions. I'm talking about like 20 million views per video. And we had Robert Oberst, which is a strongman, and he collaborated with him on a numerous amount of videos. And I remember talking to him about it, and he was like, yeah, they have a team. Preston has a team of like 2 companies who strictly just do research on thumbnails and colors that like attract people's attention. Then they compile these stuff. So there's so much research and development that's going towards what makes somebody stop and look at a picture.
Yeah.
So it's almost as like I see a picture on YouTube, a thumbnail, I'll scroll, and some of them will have like dramatic effects, whatever. But then you'll see one that's like very vibrant. Now the video might be shot very like, grungy or dark or whatever. That's a different thing. But what made an average person stop and click on that, what they call click-through rate, that's what they're researching. And I can't figure out why is it that certain things we want them to be light, bright, and airy, and other things we want them to be different and moody. Is it that dress is blue or that dress is gold? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think of like the YouTube thumbnails I've seen, like yours and like.
What do you like?
Mr.
Actually, I want to
Beast.
hear what's your style of things that you end up clicking on? Have you thought about that?
I like clean style.
Minimalistic?
Yeah. I don't know what, just like clean lines and like I'm thinking of Mr. Beast videos, dude. It's his face, it's bold letters, color like it. I'm like, okay, yeah, that, and it works. It makes me stop. Like, oh, dang, like let me see, and then, so yeah, it makes me stop. Depending on what mood I'm in, I might click on it if I'm in that mood. But I like clean styles. Just like I'm trying to think what a YouTube one that I like that's pretty clean is AD, Architectural Digest. They do like
Okay. Yeah.
theirs are they're pretty clean, if I remember right. Yeah, I like theirs. There's another one, Wendover Productions. They just like learning videos, also pretty clean. Yeah, those are two that come to my mind.
Yeah. Just
So it's just, yeah, and I think there's some people that just go for the like, hey, this is like easy on the eye, it's clean, versus like Mr. Beast yelling in your face with letters, like that'll stop you. So it works, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say, but yeah, and then the video might be completely different.
Right. I've been trying to reverse engineer of like, so every time after work, I'll sit down and I'll have during cocktail hour, like I'll watch YouTube videos of stuff that I like, but I'll also end up taking not screenshots because I'm watching on my TV, but I'll take a picture with my phone of that thumbnail and I'll save it. I have so many of them, and it makes me and I put it in this little file of like what made me want to click on that video, and oftentimes it's like I'm trying to dissect of going, okay, well the color grabbed my attention, and then after that, it made my eyes go towards their titling, like of the video. So like, there's almost like this like exploratory, like hook and bait kind of thing.
Yeah.
Before I even click on the video, what my brain is doing, and I'm curious about what's happening with photography or paintings. What's making us, first of all, be captivated by something, captured by something, and then want to explore. There's a lot of pictures. There's this account called Bright Insight, and he does a lot of like these like ancient civilization stuff and. Some of it's like UFO stuff where it's like, hey, did you know that Michelangelo had some paintings that had some little hidden illustrations of UFO? And so like a lot of these like Da Vinci, Michelangelo, all these artists of the whatever century they're part of, they have a lot of stuff in there, right? There's like people here, there's people there, there's a layer, there's a tower, and your eyes are just doing this exploratory thing. It's like you can stare at that for hours because there's so much things to look at versus like the Mona Lisa is very basic. Somehow photography is able to like have us stare at that picture for a while. Like the ones that are most fascinating to me is, like I mentioned earlier, like you see this old guy, black and white image, and there's a lot of like wrinkles on his face. But for some reason you'll stand there, me personally, and I'll like stare at those wrinkles for a while because you're almost like exploring one wrinkle after the other. Yeah. And like, what is that part of our brain that wants to do that?
Well, part of it is also, I think you wouldn't be able to, if it wasn't for the photo, it's very rare to be able to come up to that old man and just stare at him. True. He wouldn't let you, or that just wouldn't happen. So the fact there's a photo, it gives you that freedom. Like, hey, I could stand here and actually, like, I feel like I'm looking at this man's face, his eyes, his soul. Like, that's cool. Like that, you don't get that opportunity. Versus going back to like a scenery. Like, yeah, you can go out where we live and see amazing scenery any time of the day. So when you see a photo of it, you're like, oh yeah, I could see that. I saw that 2 weeks ago when I did that hike. Versus like a black and white photo of a man, like that, there's more to it. His eyes tell a story. His skin tells a story. What wars has he fought in? What family you start thinking, you see yourself in that photo, and yeah, your mind just depends. Everyone's different, but everyone's mind kind of goes in their own direction with that photo.
Why do you think black and white? It's one thing when you add coloring, like meaning you're adding ambers or whatever to make it more moody or warmer, but then going back to the complete basics of a black and white photo, why do black and white photos bring out so much more emotion than a colored photo?
Because it takes away the distraction of color. Instead of focusing on color, now you're focusing on the subject or
Interesting.
the face or color. Like Michelangelo painting, there's color everywhere. There's stuff everywhere. You're just, like I said, going all over the place. This, you get rid of all the color. You focus. So it's not about the color. It's about what was photographed. A lot of, especially older portraits, you're just focused on what they're wearing or what their facial expression was. And I think, yeah, your eyes, you just have less, I almost feel like color distracts you from the subject.
Interesting. Like the detail, and so it almost like the colors, like we were mentioning about the vibrancy, the pop. That's almost like a makeup.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean,
right. But with nature, we don't do that, right?
Yeah.
With nature, we go, look how lush green those evergreens are.
But then I'd say Ansel Adams, one of the most famous photographers of all time, he did black and whites of mountains. And like of not just mountains, but nature, and everyone loves his photos. And I think he was able to do with black and whites that a lot of people weren't. He made his blacks like really black, and there's just very moody, like the clouds were dark and scary. And I think his photos, people really liked his photos just because maybe people weren't doing that with black and whites, especially for nature. Everyone's like, why would you make nature black and white? Look at the sunset colors. Why would you get rid of that? And he's like, well, if I get rid of that, then you're focused on the clouds. Instead of the colors, you're just focused on how the gradient. Yeah, I don't even kind of just.
I wonder if it has something to do with the way our brain receives that information. I wonder if you have like this like extremely busy thing, your brain goes, whoa, that's too much. Like I used to do that with thumbnails. Like I'd have text and, like a big title text and a thing and this other thing. And then people, when they scroll over, it's like, what is this hodgepodge? And they keep going. Versus when it's simplicity, like you said, you like simple thumbnails. You'll scroll over and be like, oh, what is that? And then you'll look at the title. Oh, they did this? And then your brain decides whether or not you want to watch it. I wonder when you take away this makeup layer of vibrant colors, in contrast, your brain has this only black and white thing where it almost has like an easier way of digesting that information and processing it. And then
especially if you're scrolling and the 10 out of the 12 are like that, very vibrant and in your face, and then there's one that's clean, you just like, oh, this one's different, and you stop. Like, why is it different? So it's almost what stands out more. Or the opposite, if everything's simple and then there's one that's just bold and pops in your face, you're going to stop because you're like, oh, this one is not like the rest. Why is it not like the rest? Kind of thing.
One thing I've always been very curious, and the reason I'm curious about it is because as somebody who has to think about thumbnails and positioning, fortunately, Irina started recently working with us, and so she helps me a little bit with that side of things, is setting people up to like capture this emotion or capture this event. Like you're staging them. We're not saying like natural, like when you did our wedding photography 10 years ago, it's actually our anniversary is next month, 10 years. We have this specific picture. We were all in front of this barn and you lined everybody else, everybody up, the 5 or 6 groomsmen and bridesmaids. How do you plan for the staging of things? Because one thing I've always noticed about every wedding photographer that I've been around, they're always very confident. They're always been like, so if the bride or groom says, hey, we want to capture a picture of just a groomsman, you guys always have this ace in the pocket. Okay, so here's what we'll do. Okay, right here, stand here, stand that, put your hand right there, do this and something, and then it comes out like money. Do you guys just have this Rolodex of images that you're inspired from other photographers, or do you just have your own Rolodex, or how does that process work?
No, there's no Rolodex. I mean, it's lighting. Well, it helps, first of all, wedding, everyone's dressed up and looking good. So it's like, that's one big part. Okay, like the groomsmen shot. They're dressed in tuxes, or they look good, hair's done. That's a big part of it's done. Next part, find a good lighting. Find that, and then it's just... like I'm not gonna try and make you guys do weird like stuff. It's let me line you guys up. You guys already look good. I want to get good photos of you guys looking at the camera, like just like a nice shot. And then it's more, a lot of times it's like, hey, chill out or walk towards me or do something where I can get some more natural shots of you guys not being posy. But Rolodex wise, I mean, there I'd say there's like 3 or 4 shots I do for groomsmen, and the rest, it's more, I rather have my favorite shots of groomsmen. It's usually when they're getting ready. If it's at a hotel, there's a bar or pool table, like, hey guys, just do your thing. Like those are the best shots. You're laughing, you're having a good time. It's your best friend's wedding, or versus me trying to line you guys up. It's going to take away, which you need a couple of those shots. I'm like saying, not all the shots should be natural. I want to get a couple of shots where you guys are all lined up looking good. But yeah, 3 or 4 shots is enough of the Rolodex style shots. The rest I just want to be. Every wedding's different. Every location is different. Some groomsmen are crazy, and like I want that when the groom looks at the photos 20 years from now, I'm like, oh yeah, so and so was that he jumped into the pool that one time. That's just him. That's kind of, versus like, oh yeah, we stood in a line in front of a barn, and no, I want to remember what my best man was like. I don't remember.
Yeah.
So that's why the national photos, I think, will help you remember that.
What I want to hear some of your nightmare stories, clients wise.
Yeah, I haven't. People always ask, and
Nothing.
no, I mean,
You don't have anything.
Not nightmare. We've had some hard ones where it's.
Tell the story about the time that you lost. Kyle, you'll love this because we talk about like double SD cards on cameras to make sure you don't lose footage.
Yeah.
Tell the story you told me one time about you losing a bunch of footage from a wedding.
Yeah. So it happened twice. Once was my maybe second year or third year, and the hard drive just went bad, and it was like 2 nights of not sleeping. Took it to a hard drive recovery place in Seattle. I'm just like, hey, just get them off, whatever it costs. And then $900 later, they got.
So they can still extract photos that are not presenting on your camera from the hard drive.
Yeah, data recovery. It's not cheap. It's pretty much a lab. Like they're lab coats and dust free. They can open it up and somehow get it out. I don't know how, but they do. But he wasn't able to get all of it. So then it's just like that email. Like,
to the bride and groom, your special day. I don't have
like
half of the pictures.
I didn't have like halfway through the ceremony. So I'm like, I told him, I was like, hey, this sucks. Like I wish I could do anything. I've already paid $900 for this. I've tried everything. If there's any of your family that took photos, they can send me the photos. I'll work on them. I'll do what I can to make it right. And that's pretty much like, and they were nice about it. They're like, yeah, it sucks, but what are you going to do? And the other one,
it's funny that because like you always think of like the bridezillas. It's bad enough like when things do go right, but they don't go as perfectly right.
Yeah.
But we're talking about like you are the time machine man. Mm-hmm. Your job is to put all these memories into this time machine that they'll hold for the rest of their life. And then this just happened because of a faulty hard drive.
Yeah. And everyone's human. Like I think they understand. Like, yeah, it's not like he did this on purpose. Like it sucks. Like, I mean, the right way to do it would be back it up on 3 hard drives, but it's like for 20, 30 weddings every year. That's a lot of, And the other one we were shooting in Kentucky or Nashville, and just, how car rental keys, there's like 3 of them or 4 on a little thing. Anyways, I had them in my pocket. And for some reason, I put the memory card in my pocket, and these are CF cards, so they're pretty big. They're not tiny like SD cards, and it fell out.
What's this SF card?
SD is the tiny card that you probably use in most things.
Yeah, yeah.
CF is a compact flash, so it's bigger. It's like
a floppy disk.
No, like a quarter of a.
But you have to have a special camera to put that in, or is it an adapter?
No. The cameras take them. Like the older Nikons took them.
Oh, okay.
And most have now gone to SDs. But yeah, it just fell out of my pocket somewhere, and then we shot the wedding. And then afterwards, like that night, couldn't find the card. Next day, drove around, and we shot in like 5 different places. Like getting ready, then we took one place to take photos, then ceremony sites. Put a Craigslist ad, like, hey, if anyone found it, and I think it fell out somewhere in the street. So put a Craigslist ad, like, hey, if anyone sees a CF card.
You went on casual encounters on Craigslist. Man looking for a CF card.
Yeah, tried everything. I mean, that wasn't as bad because it was mostly just the getting ready photos and a few, like, it wasn't like an important shot. So they were understanding, gave him, an album for free, kind of, made it right. Like, hey, it sucks. Like it's our fault. I lost it.
Yeah.
You trust me, take all the photos. I lost a card. My fault. What can we do to make it right? And so they're in the end, it's like you gotta, make it right. And
sure.
But
it's interesting about making right, because making right, you go, well, like, how do you put a price on memories, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, what you did was really nice. Like, you go like, well, can I throw? Because some people go like, oh yeah, well, how about you pay us, or how about you work for free because you lost this memory that we only have one time. You know what I mean? So the making right part it's kind of subjective, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, if they wanted something like that, I mean, I'd probably do whatever they want.
Really?
It's just like, hey, I mean, I just feel really bad.
Yeah.
And I understand. That's what also a lot of, I mentioned I'm a wedding photographer people, other photographers, they're like, oh, not in a million years, or I would never do that. I don't know how you guys, because the stress, it's just like you have hanging over your head, like you can't lose these photos, once in a lifetime day, like all this stuff. And sometimes it's not, or even traveling for weddings. Like you can't miss. There's so many ferries we've almost
Really?
like we kind of push it. I mean, it's just our character is like, hey, there's safe side people that'll fly out to the wedding 2 days before, get there, settle in, and when there's people like us that'll fly out in the morning of. You're like, okay, that's not smart, but it's work.
You seem like you have a good grasp on stress. Like you have, I don't like even the way you're talking about it. You're saying like, oh, things like that happen. Like you're really like have a good feeling of like calmness towards things. You're like, this is not end of the world.
I think I've had enough stressful moments that is like, in the end of the day, you're not gonna die. Like just, I mean, why stress about it? Type of thing. It's like why you're causing more pain on yourself, psychological pain for no reason. It's usually you're the one doing it. If you just have a good mood about it or a good view, you're like, well, it's gonna happen. It'll suck, but we'll get through it. And I feel like, well, then you sleep better and you go through life happier and you're more likely to do more things versus like, oh, I'm not going to go do that or do that thing because so-and-so might happen. Well, or so-and-so might not happen. So just go do it. And especially with kids, like Julia's more on the safer side. I'm more like, just, if it happens, we'll worry about it then, like me and the kids are going to go do this. Might not be safe, but I trust them. I want them to be kids and boys and have fun and risk things and skin their knees. And once something bad happens, then we'll stress and worry and figure out how to pay for the hospital or whatever happens. And so far, nothing bad has really happened. Like
Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist, says that you have to let children do dangerous things carefully. You've heard that line before? And I truly hold that very upfront and center for me because especially the age that my boys are at, they're 8 and 7, almost 9 and 7, and they're curious. And especially now, especially oldest, he's got this like, opinion about things, or he's developing this opinion. So I could still say, "Hey, I said so," but I also know that it's wearing off. Like this is the last bit I can be on. So I'll be like, "Cool, do it." So like this last time we were at the cabin, I was like, "Hey, you boys want to chop some wood? Here's an axe." Like, what's gonna happen is if you're not following my instructions, you will chop a toe off. Or hit your shin with it or whatever. So then, you have them follow your little rubric, but it's really cool when you watch them do these dangerous things carefully. I saw this video of it, and this is one of those like TikTok, whatever overlays, but it's like Jordan Peterson is giving this talk, let your kids do dangerous things carefully. And it's this dad standing on a pallet that's being lifted by a forklift on their property. And his what looked like a 12-year-old son is slowly trying to bring this pallet that his dad's standing on to the second story window. So the dad's trying to come up to it to do something with it. And the son is the one that's driving it slowly. So it was the most prime example of you have to let them do dangerous things. They have to feel that this is a dangerous thing, and they have to feel that they have to do it carefully and that there's a lot of weight on them.
Now that builds character. He's going to remember that moment. That has more life lessons than a lot of things, I think. Versus, it just when you hang out with other families and other kids, it's easy to tell his parents don't let him do anything, or his parents are, because if the kid's just afraid to do anything and just sitting there like, oh no, my mom and dad said I can't do that, and to each their own type of thing. But I want my kids to be more experienced life.
Well, I definitely see it when it goes like, hey, let's say one of the kids' friends will be over, spend the night, and be like, hey man, your dad's coming. You want to get your backpack ready or get your shoes? And they'll be like, some of the kids will be like, can you go get it for me? And I'm like, I'm sorry, excuse me. Or the other day, one of the neighbors' kids came over, and Jack was in trouble. He can't be on his video games, and he's like, hey, can I play video games? I go, no, the boys can't play video games, so we're not doing games. But I want to play video games. And I go, I'm sorry, you don't know what it means to no? But then you see the other side, like Irina's nephews. We were at the cabin, and from what I hear, they're pretty sheltered and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, you boys want to learn how to chop some wood? And you could see these boys go like, yeah. Meaning like you're almost inviting them to this little private club of don't tell your parents, you know what I mean? Because most of the parents would be like, no. But what was cool is they got a grasp on it. They were chopping wood safely. Their parents came, and their mom was taking a video of them. But it was a prime example of you see a kid who doesn't do dangerous things enough carefully, who doesn't have responsibility. I remember hearing stories about people, and we kind of grew up like that because we both are immigrants. But back when we were growing up, we would go to the store that's a couple of miles away from the house to go buy bread when we were like 7.
Yeah.
You know, or the kids growing up in the 60s and 70s that would walk to school, you know, 5 miles uphill both ways in the snow.
Yeah. You know, I just had a talk. I don't know who. I watched a video about a YouTube video why this family will not raise their kids in suburbia, and they're comparing it to Denmark, where it's like kids bike everywhere. A 7 to 8 year old hanging out outside, it's normal. Whereas in the U.S., like you're going to get CPS called on you, and it's like, dude, that's crazy. That was normal back in the day. Even us growing up, we biked everywhere, did whatever we want, and now all of a sudden, like your kids have to be in your yard, and I don't know. I feel kind of sad for my kids. I want my boys to be able to like go explore. Especially where we live in like our home in Gig Harbor, tons of woods. Kids like love right now digging it and looking for treasure, looking for dinosaur bones or whatever he thinks he'll find. And I want him to have the freedom. Just come back, in an hour or two and get some food.
Yeah, no, that's exactly life. Do your kids still do the Tooth Fairy stuff? Do you guys ever do that Tooth Fairy?
I did it once.
You did it once? I'm still the Tooth Fairy.
Well, yeah. What do you mean?
Well, I'm still.
You're still doing it.
I'm still doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
No, one of them's kind of figured it out, but he's not blowing it for his younger brother, but the younger brother, like he's convinced, like he's in a top bunk. He's like, the tooth didn't show up last night, and I was like, well, I think if you sleep on the couch today, they might show up. And I heard that and then he remembered. He goes, I remember when Jack lost one tooth and the Tooth Fairy didn't show up, that the next day he got $2. He's like, and I'm like, dude, I'm not going to take away this like special feeling that you have, that you can be anything, that anything exists. And
well, my kids are 5 and 2, so they haven't lost teeth yet. Lev lost one tooth. He didn't lose it. The dentist pulled it out. So we haven't got.
You had to pay for that. He didn't get paid. You had to pay for it.
We haven't got to the Tooth Fairy part yet, but we will.
I think all that stuff is so fun, man. Whether it's Elf on the Shelf, the Tooth Fairy, whether it's dinosaur bones, or what happens when you go on the other end of the toilet swirling down. Do you end up in the other that stuff? You got to preserve it, because I think all that stuff helps cultivate their creativity and helps them.
No, for sure.
Create their own view of the world.
So on the drive here last night, like 10 p.m., the supermoon, dude. What's
the supermoon?
It was on Wednesday night, but last night it was huge too. I don't know. I don't know if it's something that lines up, but the moon
gravity
was huge.
wise, maybe.
It was big and yellow, like kind of. Yeah, someone mentioned it, but it was awesome. You're like, guys, look at this, and they're just amazed by it. They've never seen the moon. It was pretty much eye level when we were driving, and it
was one that was like covering like half of the.
No, it was the full moon.
No, but it was covering like half of the horizon kind of thing. Like it was
it was fully out.
It was fully out.
Fully out.
Wow.
I don't know if this is one of those rare events, but it was just cool to like see how amazed they were by the moon.
That's incredible.
Seeing it like that. But yeah, it's awesome. They're getting to the age where they have a lot more questions about things, and it's fun to teach them. And
we went camping a couple of weeks ago, and Irina went to bed or something like that, or she was putting Harper down, and I was just sitting and we're waiting until the stars come out. And the boys know I'm very fascinated by space and all that stuff. And Beckham was very fascinated by this as well. But what was wild is how much knowledge they actually have at 8 and 7 years old about space. Like they were explaining to me how wormholes work, like accurately. Yeah. And they're saying like how many more galaxies are out there. And I was like, yo, don't tell your mom, but I believe that too. Like, you know what I mean? It's just so fun because they're like and then when you invite them into this like the circle of trust, it's like, I will let you do dangerous things. I will trust you with ideas that some people might not line up with. It almost allows for them to grow and develop and not feel like somebody's feeding them any kind of baloney, So.
Yeah, no, dude, kids are way smarter than we think, especially at that age. Like, I don't have a 9-year-old yet, but I have nephews that are. I'm like, man, dude, how do you guys know this stuff?
Yeah, I never really tell them. Like, I never really shut off. Like, if I have like Joe Rogan playing, there's like profanity. I always like stop. I'll pause and I go, hey guys, if you're coming in here, there's gonna be a lot of bad words. You can't say them. You can when you become an adult, but the reason you can is right now because you don't know when you can or cannot use them around the kids. So right now you can. You can't. You can ask me what they are, and I'll tell you. But if I find out you're using these words, I can't trust you again. And it's cool. Like, they'll come in, and they're like, I've never... Like, I think Beckham one time said shit, but, like, he dropped his bike or something like that. And I was like, dude. And he's like, got it. He like locked it down.
And I think that's fine. Like, you shouldn't say, kids are smart. You tell them, they'll know. Like, you shouldn't censor every little thing and like,
Well, it's very hypocritical to be like, if you're about to slam on your brakes because a car is coming and you go shit. It's pretty hypocritical when you go, hey, you guys can't say these things. And they go, why? Well, because you can't. Well, one day you can, you know what I mean? Because you'll know whether or not you want to use that word or you can't or you shouldn't, you know?
No, I agree.
It's wild, man.
I agree.
Well, listen, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been fun picking your brain about it. I had fun with this.
Yeah,
you were like, what are we going to talk about? It's like, you and I never have a dull moment, man.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that we have lots of things to talk about. We didn't even talk about watches.
No, I want to talk about watches. I think we
didn't talk about cars.
I know. I got an appointment I got to get to. But thanks for coming. I'm excited for this. Go look up Yuriy anywhere. Yuriy Manchik Photography, right? Was there any other spot besides Instagram, Facebook?
Instagram's mostly
Yuriy Manchik Photography. And if you're in the Seattle area, well, you kind of do stuff all over the world, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I appreciate you on here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.